Spirited Away is just one of Studio Ghibli's many classic films, but it's one of my favorites because it's so thematically dense. Every scene and every character have multiple roles to play in expressing the theme of the movie, or the several themes present in the movie. Today we're going to look at just one of them. We're going to look at how Spirited Away explores how work steals your identity. But before we get into the video, I need to take a moment to thank all of you. As you may have guessed from the video's title, we've hit 300 subscribers on YouTube this month. That 300 is a small number in the grand scheme of YouTube. I can't pretend that it's anything special, but it means a lot to me because I never would have thought that I would reach this point. I went from 25 subscribers at the start of the year to, 12 times the number? Maybe? Look, I don't do maths. But it's still incredible to think that there are that many people who will look at their screens and see, hey, I made a new video. It's bizarre because 300 people, you look at YouTube channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers and stuff, and 300 is so small, but if you actually put 300 people into a room, like, I couldn't fit 300 people into my apartment. That's several buses of people who have enjoyed what I put out enough to hit subscribe, and I can't thank you enough for all of that support. As I get better at making these videos, I hope to see more of you and to hear from more of you in the comments, but just, there's nothing else to say, just thank you. Spirited Away follows a young girl named Chihiro who becomes a worker at a bathhouse for spirits after her parents get cursed and become pigs. She has to work as she tries to figure out how to save her parents from the sorceress Yubaba before they get eaten. Along the way, Chihiro befriends spirits and dragons and witches. Spirited Away is about so much. Childhood and adulthood and innocence and greed and work and courage and magic, and I could just keep going, but for this video, we're just going to look at one small part of this. We're going to look at how the story explores themes of identity, especially in how work steals your identity. Spirited Away is about the toxicity of work in many ways. It's easy to watch the film and get a read on how it's a critique of capitalism. For this video, we're just going to focus on how work can overtake your identity. During Chihiro's employment at the bathhouse, her identity comes under attack from multiple points. To begin with, we need to look at the meaning of a name. It's not uncommon in fantasy worlds to see a magic system where a name holds a lot of power, especially when that world is in connection with spirits. A name is something to be kept close and safeguarded lest somebody uses it to manipulate you. In Spirited Away, we quickly learn that Yubaba controls her workers by taking away their names when she makes them sign the contract to work at the bathhouse. When Yubaba gets Chihiro's contract, she strips her name of several kanji, reducing her to just Sen. From this, we can gather that everybody who's working at the bathhouse has not been entirely renamed, but had their names altered and reduced to a single facet. The fact that Yubaba leaves her workers with this facet is significant. When you consider what our identities are composed of, there are many, many facets. Yes, our job is a part of our identity, but so are our hobbies, our dreams, our passions, where we were raised, where we're living now, where we're going to live, the relationships we've had in all of those places with all of the people whom we have met, and everything else. There is so much. It's incredibly hard to try and quantify an identity, especially in a video like this. When we look at how Yubaba strips part of the name away, we can see an allegory for how she is reducing her worker's identity. Chihiro becomes Sen. Sen is not a fully formed person because she doesn't have a full name. Sen is just one of Yubaba's workers. She has been reduced to that tiny facet of her identity that is work and work alone. All that defines Chihiro is her role in the bathhouse and her status as Yubaba's employee. The living conditions of the workers further stress this lack of identity. All the bathhouse workers wear the same uniform. While uniforms have some practicality, in this environment, it's practically a brand stamped upon them. The workers work in these uniforms, but they also eat and sleep in them. They're never given a reprieve. Other clothing that might serve as a form of self-expression or identity are strictly forbidden. Going beyond the uniform, all of the employees are forced to live in a single, cramped, shared space. When they sleep, there's not even exposed floor for one to walk on. When Haku goes to get Chihiro to see her parents, we see that he has to be careful to only step on beds and pillows and not actual people. There's a lot you could read into this, but I want to focus again on the lack of self-expression. When everybody has to share a room like this with no amount of dignity or privacy, it's impossible to distinguish yourself from anybody else. There's no space to hang a poster of your favorite movie or to devote to a hobby like growing plants or making YouTube videos. This leads us to the next point as well, the routine we see for these workers. The entire time we're in the bathhouse, we see workers do three things: work, eat, sleep. The only time Chihiro leaves the bathhouse, except for her quest for Zenibaba at the end, is when Haku takes her to see her parents at the kennels. Chihiro doesn't do this in her free time, she does this by forsaking sleep. Otherwise, she would have just had to go straight to work. A lack of free time like this is part of how work consumes your identity. We've already mentioned that relationships are part of what makes our identity. Chihiro never would have had time to visit her family if she didn't forsake sleep. And this lack of free time is a consumption of identity. I'm sure many people can relate to this scenario. You wake up, eat some breakfast, and you're off to work with your commute. You spend most of your waking hours at work doing whatever it is you do, writing, helping customers, stocking shelves, cooking food, what have you. When you get home, you have to cook again and shower, and before you know it, you're already thinking about work the next day, about how you have to make sure you go to bed so that you can get enough sleep to properly function. There's not much time left for friends, family, for much more than maybe a few pages of a book or a bit of TV. As it consumes your free time, you become more and more of a drone, simply moving from work to sustenance and back again. This isn't true for everybody. I'm not trying to say every person who ever has lived is absolutely miserable doing their work. People enjoy their jobs. People don't necessarily go through the routine that I just outlined. But I'm sure that plenty of people heard at least a little bit of themselves in that statement. And if you did, then you understand what the workers at the bathhouse went through. This routine is all we ever see for them. Work is omnipresent and demanding, forcing the workers to give themselves over to it, allowing this small facet to dominate everything else. Yubaba contrasts all of this. She's the owner of the bathhouse who controls the names of others. We're never given any reason to suspect Yubaba has given part of her name away, or that she's even afraid of using it. Moreover, she has everything the workers lack when it comes to identity. She frequently leaves the bathhouse. Yubaba's apartment occupies a full floor of the bathhouse and is decorated with opulent flourishes that flaunt her wealth and status. The towering empty halls are a sharp contrast to the workers below. Additionally, Yubaba's work is shown to be much less demanding. Most of her duties appear to involve counting the riches she takes from the workers down below. When she does interact with the workers in the bathhouse, she does little more than direct them around. Yubaba's role is never shown to be as demanding as the workers. She seems to have ascended from work, allowing herself to have an identity that she denies her workers. In Spirited Away, there's a moment where we get to see the effect of Yubaba's name stealing on Chihiro. For a short time, Chihiro forgot her name entirely, and as she said to Haku, she was becoming Sen. She was becoming just another faceless worker in the mass. This shows what happens when work eclipses all other parts of identity. Chihiro becoming Sen meant she was losing sight of her individuality, becoming just another face among the bathhouse's steam. Haku reminding her of her name and returning Chihiro's clothing allowed her to grasp that identity of who she was once more. Chihiro's victory comes from identity as well. At the end of the story, she successfully picks out her parents from a crowd of pigs, or rather correctly identifies that they weren't there at all, and she defeats Yubaba, but there's a little bit more to this than just saying, "No, my parents are not here. Why do you ask?" Firstly, she uses the power of names herself. Chihiro calls Yubaba Granny after returning from Zeniba's house. It's not quite stealing Yubaba's name, but this still holds its own power. Yubaba is feared throughout the bathhouse as the grand sorceress who rules the world. Her name has its own power that comes from this power of Yubaba's identity. By calling her Granny, Chihiro reduces that power. It's subtle, but it takes Yubaba from being this mighty sorceress who rules over Chihiro's life and can determine the fate of her existence to another facet of Chihiro's life. Her boss, not her ruler. Additionally, the nature of Chihiro's victory is also telling in how she balances work and the external parts of her life, like family. She doesn't break her contract with swords or sorcery. There are rules to the contract she signed and to Yubaba's rule, and Chihiro follows through on these rules. As she's told at the start, Chihiro finishes what she started, in this case, her time at the bathhouse. But she does it after claiming her identity as an individual. She's able to succeed in beating Yubaba and breaking the contract and finding her parents, because she is not Sen, the faceless worker who scrubs the tubs. She is Chihiro. She has parents, and she knows who her parents are. Work and Chihiro's contract become a small part of her identity. Work is an important part of our lives. In and of itself, work is not necessarily an evil thing. But there's so many ways that work can become toxic, from horrific bosses to demanding companies that don't want you to have multiple facets to your personality, that just want you to be the face that they put out to greet customers or stock their shelves, and nothing more. One way work crushes our identity is by consuming all of our free time and crushing out any sense of self. Work should never be more than a part of our identities, and Spirited Away does an excellent job of showing why we should not let this happen and how to break free.